This is Facets of Connection, a podcast exploring how we build relationships that actually work in an evolving world. I'm your host, Sarah Melissa Oswald, a relationship coach and founder of Lead Your Love Life. Each episode explores the many dimensions of human connection, from romantic partnerships and family systems to leadership, community, and the inner relationship we have with ourselves. Through thoughtful conversations with fascinating guests and occasional deep dives into the skills that help relationships thrive, we'll explore what it takes to build connections that are rooted in dignity, respect, repair, and resilience. Because the quality of our relationships shapes the quality of our lives and the future that we're building together. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you may notice that things sound a little different around here. That's because Facets of Connection is entering a new chapter. For the first 20 episodes of this podcast, the show was created in collaboration with a nonprofit called Relational Life Foundation, an organization dedicated to making high-quality relationship education more accessible to people around the world. For over 5 years, I had the privilege of serving as the founding executive director of Relational Life Foundation, helping build programs, grow community, and expand access to relational life therapy so that thousands of people could affordably experience the power of relational work. Building and stewarding that organization was so meaningful to me, and I remain deeply grateful for that professional chapter. But over the past year, something has been shifting in me. I started feeling what the poet Rumi once described as the strange pull of what you really love. There was a quiet but persistent call in me to return more fully to the work that first drew me into this field. Working directly with couples, exploring relational systems, and helping people build relationships that are strong enough to hold real life. So a few months ago, I stepped down from my role as executive director. And this podcast is evolving alongside that transition. Facets of Connection is now my independent platform, a place where I get to explore the questions that have fascinated me for most of my life. Questions like, why are relationships both the greatest source of human joy and the greatest source of human suffering? How is it that being in love can both inspire aliveness and make us feel trapped in painful patterns? Why do some relationships grow stronger over time while others slowly erode? And perhaps most importantly, what skills do human beings need now in order to build relationships that actually thrive? For as long as I can remember, I have been fascinated by human connection. I grew up in New York City, immersed in the performing arts, dancing, singing, directing theater productions. And through those experiences, I got to encounter something that captivated me very early on in life. The feeling of belonging inside a group. The sweetness of creating something meaningful together. And that experience, the magic of collective effort and human connection, stayed with me. But of course, every relationship has two sides. The same connections that nourish us can also deeply hurt us. And like many people who eventually find themselves working in this field of relationships, I too have experienced both sides of that truth. And over time, that curiosity led me into deeper study. I completed a master's degree in environmental leadership at Naropa University, where I began studying leadership through the lens of living systems. And since then, I have trained in relational life therapy, in Gestalt psychology, in matrix works, group leadership, systems thinking, and Buddhist psychology. And across all of those disciplines, one insight that kept appearing again and again is that relationships behave like living systems. They grow, they adapt, they change over time. They're relational at every level of scale. They're dynamic and autopoetic, meaning they self-create. And they endure levels of destruction in order to evolve. And like any living system, they require attention, skill, and care. One of the biggest myths our culture teaches about relationships is that great relationships just happen. We get lucky, we find the good partner, they just happen. But in reality, healthy relationships are not accidental or by chance. They are led. Most couples were never taught the skills of relational leadership. How to regulate themselves during conflict, how to repair disconnection, how to balance power, how to create a relationship that grows stronger over time rather than slowly eroding. And helping couples learn those skills has become the central focus of my work. Over the past several years, I've been creating a relational development model that helps couples move through 3 different phases. As I've come to understand, the 3 phases have shown up for me. I didn't create them out of the blue. And here are the 3 things that I notice. First, when a couple comes to me, it's usually because they are in some kind of crisis. So my first job with them is to stabilize their system, to interrupt the reactive patterns that create conflict, essentially helping them stop hurting each other. And then, once that happens, I have the possibility of helping them learn relational leadership, which means taking responsibility for the emotional climate of the partnership. And then, as couples continue with me, if they want to cultivate something even deeper, they then move into what I call the devotional partnership stage, where the relationship becomes a source of nourishment rather than a source of stress. And this work is now taking shape in a program that I'm preparing to launch called Radiant Connection Lab. But this podcast isn't just about couples. It's about something much larger. Facets of Connection explores how human beings grow through relationship. Sometimes we'll explore romantic relationships, yes, but sometimes we'll explore leadership or community, culture, or the inner relationship we have with ourselves. Sometimes I'll bring on fascinating guests whose work intersects with psychology and spirituality, activism, creativity, or human development. And occasionally, I'll offer short reflections about the ideas that shape my work. One concept that often appears in these conversations is something called allurement. The term comes from evolutionary philosopher Brian Swim, who describes allurement as the force that draws living systems toward what they are meant to become. Just as gravity pulls planets into orbit, human beings are drawn toward the work, toward the relationships, and toward the communities that bring them fully alive. So many of the people you'll hear on this podcast are individuals who have said yes to what allures them in this life. They followed the pull toward the work that mattered most to them. And in doing so, they've helped shape the communities and cultures around them. Right now, as you might know, we are living in a moment where relationships are under enormous strain. 3 years ago, the US Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic, not just a crisis, an epidemic, linking social isolation to increased risks of heart disease, depression, dementia, and even premature death. Now, at the same time, public discourse has become increasingly polarized. Families are divided, communities are fractured, and many people feel disconnected from one another. And yet research continues to show us something remarkably consistent. One of the longest running studies on human well-being is the Harvard study of adult development. And it found that the single strongest predictor of happiness and long-term health is the quality of our relationships. Not wealth, not fame, not career success, relationships. And so learning how to relate well to one another may be one of the most important cultural skills of our time. And that's what this podcast is about. Exploring the many facets of connection that shape our lives. The inner work, relationship to self, the relational skills between us and another human, and the communities that support us. The courage that it takes to grow together. So whether you're here because you want to strengthen your relationship, deepen your leadership, or simply understand human connection more clearly, you're in the right place. Thank you for being here, and welcome to this new chapter of Facets of Connection. I'll see you soon. Thank you for spending this time with me on Facets of Connection. This podcast is part of my broader work through Lead Your Love Life and the Radiant Connection Lab, where I guide couples who feel distant, stuck in old patterns, or disconnected from their spark to rebuild closeness, communicate with care, and to fall in love all over again. If you'd like to explore that work further, you can learn more at leadyourlovelife.com. I'd also love to hear what this episode sparked for you. You can send me an email or a voice memo to sarah@facetsofconnection.com. I read every single message, and sometimes a listener's story might become part of a future episode. If you enjoyed today's episode of Facets of Connection, be sure to follow or share this show so that more people can find it, right here or on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, remember this: the quality of your life is shaped by the quality of your relationships. See you soon.